Hey guys, I haven't made a for the record advice video in a long time, so let's get to one right now. One thing that I've always tried to teach people, and many people get the concept of this completely wrong, so I figured I'd have to make a video on it. For those of you who have been here for a long time, you know that I've already talked about this topic, but not as in-depth as I will be right now, and really laying out the facts so people understand. I made a video on this actually about 8 years ago, and I was debunking this theory back then, but I'll be doing it again, just a lot more detailed. So basically, a lot of people, even professionals, will say that there is no such thing as a realist. If you call yourself a realist, you're really just a pessimist. Articles just like this one right here. And the truth is, that notion is wrong. There is such thing as a realist, and if you think that all realists are actually just pessimists, then you don't really understand what the words actually mean. Now, as far as what the professionals think, they think that people who call themselves realists make a lot of negative statements and are therefore pessimists. Now, if you're a surface level thinker, you're definitely going to agree. But if you're a person with a higher IQ who likes to look under the surface and examine things, you will see that this is completely wrong. On the face of it, do people who are realists make a lot of negative statements, like myself? Of course we do, because we look at the real world, and the real world is negative. Just because I talk about the real world for what it is, which is negative, doesn't actually mean that I am negative. So, before we get into it more, let's just go over the definitions. An optimist is a person who looks at every situation, good or bad, and looks at the positives in that situation. A pessimist is a person who looks at every situation, good or bad, but highlights the negative aspects of it. A realist, like myself, looks at every situation and talks about it exactly as it is. If it's negative, they'll say it's negative. If it's positive, they'll say it's positive. So why does everybody think that a realist is actually a pessimist? Well, I understand that a lot of people were just born yesterday. And if you were, let me be the first to enlighten you. We live in a very negative world. My latest FTR before this one, granted you can go through my whole channel for evidence on this, but I make a summary video in my previous FTR, which is called The Worst Time in History. Basically, it's an 8-minute long summary of everything that I talk about on my channel, or the world in and of itself, explaining why we are currently living in the worst time in history. Am I a pessimist for saying that? Of course not. I give reasons and evidence as to why we are living in the worst time of history. Go check out that video. And everything I said is true. Everything I said is a fact. And I'm not a pessimist. If something positive happens, I will say that it's positive. Well, I'd say one of the most common times that I'm called a pessimist is when something good happens, but then I'll say the words, yeah, but don't worry, something will happen to take away the good. And then I'll be called a pessimist. And you might be saying, well, duh, Matt, you're being pessimistic. Yeah, but you need to understand something. When I say that, I'm not just thinking negatively, like for no reason. I'm saying that based on my life experience. Most of the time in my life, when something good happens, something bad happens very shortly after to overtake the good thing that happened. I'm not being negative by saying that. Sure, it's a negative statement, but I'm not being negative. You see the difference? There's a difference between saying something negative and actually being a negative person. Saying something negative is saying that something negative is going to happen, or talking badly about something that someone else might think is neutral or good. But being pessimistic is looking at every situation and just bringing it down on purpose because of who you are or because of the way you think. When I was saying that statement, I'm going based on my own life experiences. Bad things do happen. I don't imagine them. Bad things do happen to me after something good happens. So when I say to somebody, yeah, that was a good thing, but something will overtake it, don't worry, I'm not bringing that. I'm not imagining it. I'm predicting what's going to happen. That's the difference people don't understand. The difference between being negative and just thinking negative. It's not the same thing. Personally, I think being a realist is the best thing you can be. It's important to look at every situation for exactly what it is, even if it's negative or positive, because I think if you're a pessimist, you're bad because you're just looking at the negative in everything, and it's not always based on experience. There are many people who have really good lives that are pessimists, and it's just a psychological thing. They look at the negative in everything. Even if there's an equal number of positives and negatives, they will focus on those negatives only and ignore the positives. It's not like me where I'm pointing out the negative things, because I can point out the negative things while still acknowledging that the positive ones exist. Pessimists don't do that. They completely ignore the positives. Again, a difference people don't understand. But at the same time, being an optimist is also a bad thing. Why? Well, let me put it this way. As far as I'm concerned, being an optimist is what I would call false hope. Now again, am I being a pessimist by saying that? No, and here's why. A very simple reason. I mean, sure, I am saying that being an optimist can be a negative thing, which is a negative statement. But at the same time, my reasoning is much different than what the average person might believe. An optimist will not only focus on the positives, but they will also constantly hope for and believe that the positive is happening, and many times it can, which is great. But at the same time, the more optimistic you are in life, the more times that you will be disappointed because you're not expecting things to be bad. Life is going to be bad and good. You need to expect both. That's why it's important to be a realist. But if you're an optimist, always expecting the best or thinking of things as the best, you're never preparing yourself for the worst, and you're not going to be a tough person. And B, you'll only be more disappointed when the bad things happen because you weren't expecting them. So that's why I call it false hope. All in all, realists are realists. They're not just pessimists in disguise, as some of the professionals believe. Yeah, we make negative statements because we live in a very negative world. With our world the way it is and how corrupt it is, the way the government is, the way the mainstream media is, the way people are, it's very hard to remain as a positive person. You can still be a positive person. You can still be a happy person while acknowledging that the world is fucked beyond belief. That's what a realist is. I'm not a pessimist for acknowledging negatives. I can be a happy person. I can be content. I can be positive with certain aspects of life while still looking at the world saying, you are fucked. How do I do it? Well, maybe that's the key here that people don't understand is how do you remain happy living in a negative world? And I don't mean negative in your mind, not pessimist. I'm talking about the negative world. I'm talking about how people fucking suck. The media fucking sucks. Everything sucks these days, and that's not pessimist. That's just reality. Our reality does objectively suck. So again, but if I'm going to be a realist, or as dumb people say, a pessimist, how do I stay happy? Well, here's the thing. For me personally, and by the way, I've actually made videos teaching this, it's important to always expect that things will get worse. Now, objectively in our world, things do get worse as time goes on. That's just a fact. Sorry if you don't like it, it's a fact. So if you expect things to continue getting worse and not stay the same or better, because they don't anyway, then you can stay content. Basically what happens is in your mind you think to yourself, you know what, the world sucks, I acknowledge that it sucks, but I'm going to try and be as happy as I'm able to be. Whether if I can find happiness within the shitty world, or if I can ignore the shitty world and be happy. Again, I said ignore, not, like to not acknowledge. Because again, you can acknowledge something but also ignore it. How does that work, you may ask? Well, you're smart enough to realize that society is fucked up, but not actually let it affect you. And that's another very important thing people need to learn. So that's what it comes down to is, you acknowledge that the world is fucked, but don't actually let it bother you to the point where you're ruining your own life. You gotta find that balance, which is what realism is all about. Balance. Looking at negative and calling it negative. Looking at positive and calling it positive. So no, realists are not pessimists. They're realists. Sorry to all the professionals, but I'm a real professional. What do you think, for the record?